Hello YouTube, I'm Vigelant and boy am I excited to make this video. Today I will be reviewing one of my favorite ships in the game and World War II legend, the US Battleship Missouri. The video was kindly provided by one of my clanmates Dynamo, so without further delay, let's get into it. The USS Missouri is an Iowa-class battleship and was the third ship of the United States Navy to be named after the US state of Missouri. She was the last battleship commissioned by the United States, and it is best remembered as the site of the surrender of the Empire of Japan, which ended World War II. Missouri was ordered in 1940 and commissioned in June 1944. In the Battle for the Pacific of World War II, she fought in the battles of Iwo Jima and Okinawa and shelled the Japanese home islands. Then she fought in the Korean War from 1950 to 1953, and after the Korean War, Missouri was decommissioned in 1955 into the United States Navy Reserve Fleets, but then reactivated and modernized in 1984 and provided fire support during Operation Desert Storm in January and February 1991. In 1998, she was donated to the USS Missouri Memorial Association and became a museum ship at Pearl Harbor. The Iowa class of battleships was designed in the late 1930s in response to the US Navy's expectations for a future war with the Empire of Japan. American officers preferred slow but heavily armed and armored battleships. However, Navy planners and designers determined that such a fleet would have difficulty in bringing the faster Japanese fleet to battle, particularly the Kongo-class battle cruisers and the aircraft carriers of the 1st Air Fleet. In the end, it was decided that it will be best if they build fast and agile ships. Missouri was 270 meters long and was powered by 4 General Electric steam turbines at 212,000 shaft horsepower. The turbines were intended to give a top speed of 32 knots, which is the equivalent of 60 km per hour or 37 miles per hour. The ship had a cruising range of 15,000 nautical miles, which is about 28,000 kilometers or 17,000 miles. Her crew numbered 117 officers and 1,804 enlisted men. The ship was armed with a main battery of 9 16-inch guns in 3 triple-gun turrets, 2 of which were placed forward and the third one on the aft. The secondary battery consisted of 20 127mm dual guns and was also equipped with an anti-aircraft battery of 80 40mm guns and 49 20mm guns. The main armor belt was 370mm thick, while the main armor deck was 152mm thick. On 14th of December 1944, Missouri departed San Francisco and sailed for Ulithi in the Caroline Islands, where she joined her fleet on 13th of January 1945. She then joined the Faster Carrier Task Force and served as part of the anti-aircraft screen for the carriers Lexington, Hancock, and San Jacinto, which is by the way called Task Group 58, during the raid on Tokyo. By 16th of February, the task force had arrived off the coast of Japan to begin a series of air strikes. The fleet then proceeded to Iwo Jima, which was invaded by American group forces on 19th of February. Task Force 58 departed in early March and returned to Ulithi to replenish fuel and ammunition. Missouri was transferred to Yorktown Task Group. With her new task group, which consisted of carriers again, Missouri departed again on 14th of March for another round of airstrikes on Japan. American aircraft carriers struck a variety of targets around the inland sea, which prompted a Japanese counterattack that struck several carriers. The carrier Franklin was badly damaged and Missouri's task group was detached to cover her withdrawal. By 22nd of March, Franklin had left the area of operations and Missouri group returned to the fleet to join the preparations for the upcoming invasion of Okinawa. While operating with the carriers on 11th of April, Missouri came under attack from a kamikaze that struck the side of the vessel below the main deck. The impact shattered the aircraft, throwing gasoline on the deck that rapidly ignited. Missouri's crew quickly suppressed it. For the rest of the World War II, Missouri remained in task forces with carrier groups and provided anti-aircraft protection for the carriers. After the bombardment on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan surrendered. The surrender ceremony was held on Missouri by Fleet Admiral Chester Nimitz, General of the Army Douglas MacArthur, and Japanese representatives headed by the Foreign Minister Mamoru Shigemitsu. In the morning of 6th of September, Missouri departed Tokyo Bay and sailed unescorted for Hawaii. She arrived at Pearl Harbor on 20th of September 1945. The war, however, was not over for her. In 1950, the Korean War broke out, prompting the United States to intervene in the name of the United Nations. President Truman was caught off guard when the invasion struck, but quickly ordered US forces stationed in Japan into South Korea. Truman also sent US-based troops, tanks, fighter and bomber aircraft, and a strong naval force to Korea to support the Republic of Korea. As part of the naval mobilization, Missouri was called up from the Atlantic Fleet and dispatched from Norfolk on 19th of August to support the United Nations forces on the Korean Peninsula. Missouri arrived just west of Kyushu on 14th of September 1950, where she became the flagship of Rear Admiral Alan Edward Smith. She was the first American battleship to reach Korean waters, and she immediately started bombardment of Shamchok in an attempt to divert troops and attention from the landings on Incheon. This was the first time since World War II that Missouri had fired her guns. She was in the company of the cruiser Helena and two destroyers that shelled the Korean land. Missouri conducted additional operations with carriers and show bombardments off the coast of Korea until 19th of March 1951. She was then relieved of duty in the Far East and departed Korean waters on 28th of March 1951 and traveled to Norfolk. On 5th of January 1953, Missouri was called for help again for the Korean War. When she arrived in Korean waters, she was assigned on patrolling missions along the east coast of Korea to support troops ashore. While on her patrols, she bombarded key Korean positions, destroying main supply routes along the eastern seaboard of Korea. The last bombardment mission by Missouri was on 25th of March 1953. She was then relieved on 6th of April by her older sister, New Jersey. This was the end of her second war, and she was then decommissioned and served as tourist attraction until 1984. When Ronald Reagan became a president of the United States, he decided to rebuild the US fleet to its former glory. Missouri was commissioned again and went through modernizations in the summer of 1984. Over the next several months, the ship was upgraded with the most advanced weapons available. They installed anti-ship missiles, 8 launcher mounts for Tomahawk missiles, 4 Phalanx close-in weapon system rotary cannon for defense against enemy anti-ship missiles and enemy aircraft. Modernization also included upgrades to radar and fire control systems for her guns and missiles and improved electronic warfare capabilities. On 2nd of August 1990, Iraq, led by the President Saddam Hussein, invaded Kuwait. In the middle of the month, US President George Bush sent the first several 100,000 troops along with strong force of naval support to Saudi Arabia and the Persian Gulf area to support a multinational force in a standoff with Iraq. Missouri was again called for action and departed on 13th of November 1990 for the troubled waters of the Persian Gulf. Missouri fired her first Tomahawk missile at Iraqi targets on 17th of January 1991, followed by 27 additional missiles over the next 5 days. On 29th of January 1991, the Perry-class frigate Curtis led Missouri through a minefield using advanced mine avoidance sonar in order to get Missouri into position to begin shelling Iraqi military outposts. In her first naval gunfire, Missouri supported Operation Desert Storm and she shelled an Iraqi command and control bunker near the Saudi border. This was the first time that her guns had been fired in combat since March 1953. The battleship bombarded Iraqi beach defenses in occupied Kuwait in the night of 3rd of February, firing 112 rounds over the next 3 days. She continued to fire on several targets throughout the next days. On 26th of February 1991, the combat operations were already out of the range of the battleship's weapons. Missouri had fired a total of 783 shells and launched 28 Tomahawk cruise missiles during the campaign. This was the end of her third major war, and she then departed for Pearl Harbor. In the next few years, she took part in several training operations. With the collapse of the Soviet Union in the early 1990s and the absence of a real threat to the United States came drastic cuts in the defense budget. As a result, Missouri was decommissioned on 31st of March 1992 after 16 total years of active service. Missouri can still be seen today. She is docked at Fort Island in Pearl Harbor, overseeing the remains of the sunken during the attack on Pearl Harbor, Arizona. So this was the life of the US Battleship Missouri. Fortunately, we can still see it today. If you like this video, hit that subscribe button, as I will be making many more videos based on in-game ships and the historical events they were involved in. Thank you all for joining. Enjoy the rest of the battle, and I'll see you in my next video.
The ship is on fire!